Have you ever stopped to think about who is truly watching the movie of your life? I'm not referring to the person sitting on the couch with you, or the main character you play each day. I'm talking about something deeper, a consciousness that seems to inhabit experience itself, an observer that is always present, feeling, perceiving, existing. At some point throughout the daily rush between one thought and another, one task and another, you may have had a fleeting glimpse of this presence. Perhaps it was a moment of unexpected clarity, a sense that something greater was at play, or a sharp awareness of your own existence that transcended the usual eye. These flashes may seem random, almost like a glitch in the system of reality we know. But what if these moments are not accidents, but rather signs? Signs that this fundamental consciousness, this primordial observer, is not only present but actively manifesting through you, right now. It's easy to dismiss these sensations as fatigue, stress, or simply imagination. We live in a world that values concrete action, tangible logic, and direct sensory experience. The idea of a separate or fundamental observer consciousness sounds to many esoteric, far removed from practical reality. However, what quantum physics has to tell us about the nature of reality, and what deep meditation and ancient spiritual traditions have explored for centuries, points to a fascinating interconnection between the observer and the observed. What if the very reality we experience is shaped in part by the nature of the perceiver? What if the line between the thinking I and the feeling consciousness is more tenuous than we imagine? This guide is not intended to be an instruction manual for achieving a state of enlightenment, nor to definitively unravel profound mysteries. Instead, we will embark on a curious and reflective exploration. Our goal is to demystify the idea of an observer and present 7 signs, 7 subtle but powerful clues that may suggest this fundamental consciousness is breathing through you right now. We'll unpack how these signs can manifest in your everyday life, from moments of profound connection to seemingly mundane insights. We'll explore what these signs might mean in a broader context, connecting them with insights from modern science and ancient wisdom. Prepare to look at your own experience from a slightly different perspective. We're not here to prove anything, but rather to investigate, to open the door to the possibility that your perception of reality and your very existence are much richer and more interconnected than you may have considered until now. The journey begins with an invitation to observe the observer, to notice the signals that consciousness itself sends us, often silently but always present. What you discover could change how you perceive yourself and how you interact with the world around you. Let's dive into this exploration slowly, with an open mind and a heart receptive to the signs that life itself presents us. These 7 signs can be the key to unlocking a deeper understanding of who you truly are, beyond the limitations of the ego and habitual identifications. The first sign that the observer is functioning fully lies in the ability to experience presence even in the midst of chaos. Think of the last time you found yourself in a high-pressure situation, a tight deadline at work, a heated argument, or even a moment of imminent danger. In such scenarios, the natural tendency is for the mind to dissipate into anxiety, worry about the past, or fear of the future, fragmenting the experience into a series of emotional reactions and uncontrolled thoughts. However, there may have been a moment, however brief, when you felt strangely centered, as if observing the situation from the outside, without being completely swept away by the current. It wasn't an absence of emotion, but rather an underlying clarity that allowed emotion to be felt without completely dominating perception. This inner stillness, this ability to ground in the here and now, when everything around seems to be falling apart, is a direct manifestation of the observer in action. It is pure awareness manifesting as a point of unshakable stability amidst the storm of everyday experience. This stillness is not a state of numbness. Rather, it is a state of heightened alertness where every detail is perceived with unusual clarity, free from the distortion caused by anxiety or mental rumination. It is as if a high-definition camera, previously blurred by noise, suddenly comes into perfect focus, capturing reality with astonishing fidelity. This ability to maintain a calm observation point, even under extreme stress, is a strong indication that your fundamental consciousness is operating at a deeper level, transcending the automatic reactions of the ego. It is a reminder that beneath the agitated surface of our thoughts and feelings lies a space of serenity and clarity that can be accessed. Delving a little deeper into this territory, the second hallmark is the emergence of a sense of space between you and your thoughts or emotions. Typically, our identification with our thoughts is almost absolute. If we think I'm a failure, we tend to feel inherently like a failure. If we feel anger, we become the anger itself. This fusion is so complete that it becomes difficult to discern where the thought ends and the person begins. However, when the observer manifests more prominently, a subtle but noticeable distance emerges. You may perceive your thoughts as transient mental events, like clouds passing in the sky, rather than as truths about yourself. Similarly, intense emotions may arise and be felt, but with a clarity that they are experienced by you, not you. This space is the observer's field of action. It is the ability to witness internal processes without completely identifying with them. Imagine watching a flowing river. You're on the shore watching the water flow, but the water isn't you and you aren't the current. This detachment allows for a newfound freedom, where the ability to choose how to respond to a thought or emotion becomes possible, rather than being swept along by it. This awareness of space isn't an intellectual feat. It's a direct experience, a shift in the quality of consciousness. It's as if a zoom out spontaneously occurs in your perception, allowing you to see the entire mental and emotional landscape without getting lost in a single element. This ability to relate to your internal states from a witness perspective is a fundamental pillar in activating observer consciousness. The third indicator, closely linked to the previous one, is the experience of disidentification from social roles or rigid self-image. We often define ourselves through labels. I'm an engineer, I'm a mother, I'm shy, I'm successful. These identities, while useful for navigating the world, can become prisons, shaping our expectations and limiting our potential. The observer, by nature, transcends such labels. One sign of their presence is the realization that these labels are, in fact, constructs, tools we use, but that they do not define our essence. You may find yourself instinctively questioning the validity of criticism, not out of arrogance, but because the criticism seems to target a self that you recognize as a persona, not your totality. Similarly, a compliment can be received with gratitude, but without a corresponding ego inflation, because the observer recognizes the transience and relativity of external recognition. This disidentification does not imply apathy or a lack of engagement with life. On the contrary, it allows for a more authentic and less reactive engagement. When you're not trapped by the need to defend a specific self-image, you become freer to act based on what's right and necessary in the moment, rather than acting to preserve a reputation or status. This liberation from the constraints of personal identity opens up a vast realm of possibilities and allows for a more genuine and spontaneous expression of self. It's as if an actor, after a play, could strip away the costume and the character, returning to a purer self, free from the demands of the stage. Moving to a more subtle level, the fourth sign emerges as a keen attention to beauty and wonder in seemingly trivial details. In our daily rush, the mind focused on goals and problem-solving tends to overlook the sensory richness of the present moment. However, when the observer is operating at its fullest, there is an openness to appreciate the world in its texture and nuance. You might find yourself suddenly captivated by the way sunlight falls on a leaf, the complexity of a pattern in the asphalt, or the unexpected melody of a bird. This appreciation is not a forced aesthetic exercise, but a spontaneous awareness of the wonder inherent in existence. Life, seen through the eyes of the observer, is not just a series of events to be managed, but a spectacle to be witnessed. This ability to find the extraordinary in the ordinary is an indication that awareness is more present, less obscured by mental noise and worries. It's an invitation to slow down and recognize the profound interconnectedness of all things, where even the smallest detail reflects the vastness of the whole. This perception of the intrinsic beauty of reality is a glimpse into the perspective of the observer, who sees unity and perfection even in what the analytical mind might consider insignificant. This openness to wonder is, in itself, a form of prayer, a silent celebration of existence itself. Finally, the fifth sign manifests as an intuitive understanding and a deep sense of connection with others, transcending superficial barriers. When we are immersed in our own concerns and identifications, our perception of others is often filtered by judgments, prejudices, and expectations. The observer, however, is able to see beyond these constructs. You may find yourself feeling genuine and spontaneous empathy for a stranger, even without knowing their background. An exchange of glances with someone can evoke a feeling of deep recognition, as if you share a common truth. This connection is not based on intellectual or social affinities, but on a recognition of the fundamental consciousness that resides in all beings. It is the realization that, beneath differing appearances and life experiences, there is an underlying unity. This intuitive understanding is a powerful sign that the observer is active, perceiving the invisible web that unites all existence. This sense of unity can manifest as a decrease in feelings of isolation and an increase in compassion, paving the way for more meaningful and harmonious interactions. It is a glimpse of reality as an interconnected whole, where each being is a unique expression of a single consciousness. The sixth point to consider is the inability to hold on to specific memories with the same emotional intensity as before. When observing consciousness becomes more prominent, our relationship with the past changes fundamentally. The memories still exist, the events occurred, but the veil of emotional charge that enveloped them begins to dissipate. You may revisit a painful event that previously paralyzed you with anguish, and now, although the memory is there, the sharp pain has been replaced by a more detached appreciation of the experience, perhaps even with a touch of compassion for the you who suffered. This lessening of emotional attachment to past events is not forgetting, nor a denial of personal history. It's more as if the psychic energy that bound you to those memories is being released. Imagine an old movie you've seen many times, and that always left you devastated. Now, upon rewatching it, you still recognize the plot and the characters' emotions, but you are a more mature viewer, able to appreciate the art of film without dissolving into the dramatic experience. This liberation allows the present to be lived more fully, without the constant weight of the emotional burdens of the past. Consequently, the mental energy previously consumed by rumination or recurring pain becomes available for the experience of the present. This transformation in the relationship with memory is one of the most liberating signs of the observer's presence, as it dismantles many of the ties that bind us to a past that is now gone, allowing the present to flourish. Furthermore, a seventh sign, and perhaps one of the most subtle yet powerful, is the emergence of a peculiar, almost paradoxical humor in the face of adversity. Instead of reacting with despair or frustration to setbacks, you may find yourself cracking a slight smile, as if recognizing the inherent absurdity of the situation itself, or your initial reaction. This isn't a forced joy or a denial of the problem, but rather a flash of wisdom that recognizes the duality and impermanence of all things. It's as if you can suddenly see the cosmic joke in being frustrated with something completely beyond your control. This detached perspective, this ability to laugh at yourself and the seriousness with which we often take life's challenges, is an indication that the observing consciousness is at work. It introduces a lightness, a mental flexibility that can transform stressful experiences into learning opportunities or even moments of fun. In contrast to the rigidity of the ego that clings to the need to be right or have things a certain way, the observer recognizes the fluidity of existence and finds a certain delight in this unpredictable flow. This ironic serenity, this ability to dance with life's uncertainties, is a testament to the maturity of consciousness that transcends egoic preoccupation. This new lens through which adversity can be viewed with a touch of humor releases tension and opens space for creative solutions and greater resilience. It is the realization that often our own resistance to reality is the greatest source of our suffering. An eighth clue, which often manifests unexpectedly, is the vivid perception of the interconnectedness between seemingly disparate events. The observer, transcending the linearity and rigid causality that the everyday mind tends to impose, begins to glimpse the invisible threads that unite occurrences that, at first glance, would seem completely unrelated. Imagine, for example, running into someone you haven't seen in years, and that person, without knowing the exact reason for your thought, mentions something that had been deeply intriguing to you that day, providing a crucial piece to a personal puzzle. Or perhaps after a particularly vivid and enigmatic dream, you encounter a situation the next day that seems to directly reflect the symbolism of that dream, offering a clarity that rational analysis could not provide. This perception of synchronicity, of a hidden pattern revealing itself, is a testament to the observing consciousness that operates beyond sequential logic. This isn't magic or predestination in the deterministic sense, but rather a recognition of the intrinsically interconnected nature of reality, where the individual I is merely a point in a vast web of relationships. Thus, the observer grasps not only isolated events but also the underlying melody that unites them, perceiving harmony amidst the apparent cacophony of life. This recognition of meaningful patterns which seem guided by a subtle and pervasive intelligence is a powerful manifestation of this consciousness that permeates and connects everything. Continuing along this same line of reasoning, the ninth manifestation reveals itself in the experience of a spontaneous creative flow, where ideas and solutions seem to emerge without conscious effort. Unlike the deliberate mental process of brainstorming or problem-solving, which involves analysis, comparison, and cognitive effort, this form of creativity is characterized by surrender and permissiveness. You might, for example, be working on a complex project without a clear solution in mind, and suddenly, while relaxed, perhaps even performing a mundane task like washing dishes or taking a walk, an image, a word, or a metaphor pops into your mind, opening a new path to resolution that previously seemed impenetrable. This spontaneity is an indication that the mind is no longer operating exclusively in the mode of conscious control, but is allowing the deeper intelligence, which the observer represents, to express itself. The I that thinks and plans gives way to a broader field of consciousness, where creativity can flourish freely. This creative fluidity is not limited to artistic pursuits. It can manifest itself in practical problem solving, in the way you communicate, or in the way you navigate complex social situations. It's as if consciousness, freed from the rigidity of control, could move with the grace of a river, bypassing obstacles and finding the most efficient and beautiful paths to reach its destination. Accepting this flow, rather than trying to force it, is essential for this intelligence to fully manifest. 10th, observe the emergence of an unusual capacity to forgive, both yourself and others, with a depth that transcends mere resignation. In our daily lives, it's common to hold on to resentment, guilt, and hurt, both those we inflict and those we suffer. These negative emotions create barriers in our relationships and generate considerable psychic burden. However, when the observer manifests more prominently, an inherent understanding of the imperfection and interconnectedness of all beings emerges. You may find yourself genuinely able to forgive someone who has hurt you deeply, not because you've forgotten what happened or minimized the pain, but because you begin to perceive that person's full story, their own struggles and limitations, and how interconnected we are in our shared suffering. Similarly, excessive self-criticism and paralyzing guilt can begin to give way to gentle self-compassion. You see yourself as a learning being with both failures and successes, accepting your humanity with greater tenderness. This ability to forgive authentically is a sign that your consciousness is operating from a place of greater wisdom and compassion, recognizing that holding on to hurt only perpetuates suffering for everyone involved. It's an act of liberation, both for the forgiver and indirectly for the forgiven, allowing the energy previously trapped by negativity to be redirected toward growth and connection. Moving on, the 11th observation resides in the experience of a significant mental stillness, even in moments that would normally be filled with internal noise. Often, our mind is like a radio tuned to multiple stations simultaneously, broadcasting an incessant stream of thoughts, worries, plans, and memories. This mental noise can be so omnipresent that we forget what silence feels like. However, a sign of the observer's activation is the perception of pauses in this flow, moments when the mind quiets, not through effort, but through an emergent naturalness. You might find yourself in a waiting situation, for example, and instead of being immediately consumed by thoughts of what to do next or by trivial concerns, you simply are, experiencing a state of calm and serene presence. This absence of mental agitation does not mean an absence of perception. On the contrary, this stillness often allows for even greater clarity and acuity of observation. It's as if the screen of your consciousness, previously filled with static, suddenly becomes clear, allowing the image of the present to be seen in sharp detail. This inner serenity, this ability to exist in a state of no thought without anxiety, is one of the clearest indicators that fundamental consciousness is operating more prominently, transcending the usual mental turbulence. Finally, the 12th sign, and perhaps the most profound in its implications, is the realization that your true identity resides not in your accomplishments, roles, or even your thoughts and emotions, but in a pure witnessing consciousness. It is a subtle yet radical shift in how you define yourself. Instead of seeing yourself as what I do or what I think, you begin to perceive yourself as that which perceives all this. This realization is not an intellectual concept, but an experiential conviction. You may glimpse this fundamental identity in moments of deep meditation or in peak experiences where the sense of self temporarily dissolves, but it can also emerge in unexpected moments of everyday life. It is the recognition that regardless of external circumstances or internal states, there is a substratum of consciousness that remains unchanged. This understanding does not diminish the importance of your actions or your life, but contextualizes them within a much broader and eternal framework. This identification with pure consciousness is the essence of what many spiritual traditions call awakening, for it frees you from the need to seek external validation or cling to transient identities. It is the realization that you are, at your deepest essence, the unchanging observer, the silent witness to the entire dance of existence. As we weave the intricate threads of our exploration, a landscape of perception begins to unfold, richer and more multifaceted than we could have initially anticipated. The seeds of curiosity sown at the outset have germinated into a garden of insights, where the nature of observation and the very fabric of reality intertwine in surprising ways. Reflecting on this journey thus far, it is palpable how the diverse facets we have unfolded converge toward a focal point, like multiple rivers flowing into a deeper ocean of understanding. The perspective that opens is not one of a single definitive revelation, but rather one of gradual expansion, where familiarity with our own experience is tinged with new nuances and possibilities. This convergence suggests that the subtle echoes we identify are not mere background noise in our consciousness, but rather resonances of a more encompassing truth, echoing through the tapestry of being. The path we walk, punctuated by moments of clarity and silent questions, leads us to a threshold. It is a space where the veils of habitual identification become thinner, allowing us to glimpse a broader panorama of our own existence. Just as a sculptor gradually reveals the latent form in the rough stone, we have uncovered the layers that obscure the fundamental nature of consciousness. The clues we gather, in their diversity, present themselves not as isolated fragments but as pieces of a cosmic puzzle, each contributing to a more complete and harmonious picture. The way our relationship with time and with others transforms, the lightness that can emerge in the face of tribulations, all of this points to an inner reconfiguration, a realignment with a reality that has always been present, but often remained hidden beneath the surface of everyday hustle and bustle. At this stage of our investigation, we realize that the different manifestations explored are not isolated events, but rather interconnected expressions of a single underlying principle. They complement each other, reinforcing the idea that consciousness is not a passive receiver of information, but an active agent in shaping experience. The way attention deepens, the way social labels lose their grip, and the ability to feel a deeper connection all contribute to a picture in which the observer is not merely a spectator, but an intrinsic and vital participant in the manifestation of reality. Like a conductor directing a complex orchestra, observing consciousness seems to orchestrate the symphony of our lives, bringing harmony from what might otherwise seem dissonant. As we move toward the final reflection, it becomes clear that this journey is not about finding something new, but rather about recognizing what has always been there, waiting to be perceived in its fullness and magnificence. The culmination of this exploration invites us to a recognition, a subtle yet profound awakening to the nature of our own existence. The signs we uncover: stillness and chaos, the space between thoughts, the disidentification of roles, the appreciation of beauty, connection with others, the transformation of memory, humor in adversity, the perception of synchronicities, creative flow, the capacity to forgive, mental serenity, and our own identity as pure consciousness, are not merely isolated events but facets of the same underlying reality. They converge to a point of unity, revealing that the observer is not a separate entity, but the very essence of our experience. This is not an external discovery, but rather a return to an intrinsic state of being, often obscured by the noise of everyday life. The importance of these signs lies not in their rarity, but in their constant presence, awaiting the moment our attention turns inward. They show us that the reality we perceive is a continuous dance between what is observed and the act of observing itself. The line between subject and object, between self and world, becomes fluid, revealing a fundamental interconnection that permeates everything. Therefore, the final invitation that emerges from this journey is for continual and gentle observation. This is not an effort to force these signs to occur, but rather to cultivate them through a more attentive and receptive presence. True practice begins now, not in seeking something grand or extraordinary, but in recognizing the depth of the ordinary, the wonder that resides in the present moment, and the vast, unshakable awareness that breathes through each of us in every instant. May this understanding blossom into serenity, clarity, and a more authentic connection with the living tapestry of existence. With each breath, the observer is present, and reality unfolds, inviting us to simply be.